I opened his door without knocking, thinking he was asleep. Instead, I froze at the sight in front of me. My stepson laid sprawled on the bed, legs apart, his hand wrapped around the biggest thing I had ever seen. It throbbed under his touch, thick and heavy. I should have turned away. I should have closed the door and walked out, but I did not. Something darker and hungrier inside me stirred. My heart raced. My breath caught. I stepped closer, hypnotized. He looked up at me, his lips curling into a wicked smirk. Without words, he invited me in, and shame melted away into a searing heat. My fingers trembled as I reached for him. He groaned as I wrapped my hand around him, struggling to contain all of him. He needed help, and in that twisted, forbidden moment, I offered mine. Welcome back to Sounds of Infidelity, where a quiet home can hide the darkest secrets. Today's story is a raw confession from a stepmother who walked through a door she should have left closed, only to find herself trapped in a dangerous game of manipulation and desire. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Let's begin. My name is Tracy, and I've lived in the vast, quiet landscapes of Montana for most of my adult life. Small towns like this are good at keeping secrets, burying them under heavy snow, layers of dust, and a profound, unbreakable silence. I married Victor when I was 44. He was a rugged salt and pepper man with a rancher's calloused hands and a preacher's commanding voice. Strong, respected in our community, but emotionally absent. He had a son, Russell, from a previous marriage. When I first met Russell, he was only 15, all sharp knees and awkward, shy smiles. He was polite, deeply reserved. But as the years passed, the boy filled out, growing into a man. A tall, broad-shouldered, slow-smiling man. Victor and we had stopped truly touching each other about 2 years ago. There was no affair that I knew of, no single dramatic fight. Just a quiet, mutual retreat into separate rooms, separate routines, separate lives. I stayed out of duty, out of habit, and, if I'm being honest, out of the deep-seated fear of the unknown. Russell had come home for the summer after finishing college. He said he needed some time to figure things out before starting his life. I let him stay in the guest room at the end of the hall, but somehow day by day we kept crossing into each other's space. Lingering glances in the kitchen that lasted a second too long. Shirtless mornings after he'd been working out in the barn. His hand brushing against mine when we both reached for the same serving dish at dinner. That night, I couldn't sleep. The old window fan in our bedroom hummed a monotonous, lonely tune, and Victor was snoring lightly in the room down the hall, a room he had started sleeping in more often than not. I had walked out to the kitchen to get a glass of cold water, and then I heard him. I should have left. God knows I should have left. But I did not. I stood at his partially open doorway, watching my own stepson move with those slow, deliberate strokes, my name tumbling from his lips like a dark, secret prayer he had said 100 times before. And when he saw me standing there watching him, he did not stop. Neither did I. I walked in and closed the door softly behind me. I let my thin silk robe fall just enough to tease, not to fully reveal. He reached for me with hands that were shaking, but it was my own voice that sealed our shared sins. Your father doesn't have to know, I'd said. We did not make love that night. What we did was raw, reckless, and utterly, completely terrifying. But in those few, stolen, breathless moments, I had felt seen, desired, and so intensely, dangerously alive. Every forbidden moan, every illicit touch, every ragged, shared gasp, it all clawed at the years of quiet, profound silence and neglect I had so patiently, so dutifully endured. I had wanted to feel guilty, but guilt, I discovered, never even showed up that night. It came much later, much later. because what I did not realize in that single intoxicating moment was that I had just awakened something in Russell, something darker, deeper, and far more dangerous than I was in any way prepared to handle. The next morning, the house was too quiet. Victor had already gone out to the barn, just as he always did around 6 a.m. His worn leather boots were gone from the porch. His old dented thermos was missing from the kitchen counter. The same routine, the same rhythm. But nothing, absolutely nothing, felt the same to me. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched, cold coffee in my hands, when Russell walked in. He did not say a single word. He just looked at me with those same eyes from the night before. Dark. Steady. Unapologetic. He was shirtless again. And this time, I knew it was no accident. His jeans hung low on his hips, and his very posture radiated a new confidence. A confidence that was higher than it had ever been before. "Morning," he said, his voice a low, gravelly sound. I looked up at him, my own chest tightening. We should talk about what happened last night, Russell." He just smiled. That lazy, dangerous smile. "We could," he said. "Or, we could just do it again." My breath caught in my throat. I hated, with a surprising intensity, the way my own body reacted to him. The way a familiar, yet so unwelcome heat curled deep inside me, like a dormant flame waiting for a breath of air. But I shook my head, my voice firming with a resolve I did not truly feel. "No. It was a mistake, Russell." He leaned down then, his lips just inches from my ear. "Then why?" he whispered. "Are you shaking?" He was right. My hands, resting against the warm ceramic of the mug, were trembling slightly. Not from fear, from a deep, undeniable craving. I stood up then, and walked away from him, from the kitchen, from the haunting memory of the night before. But no matter how far I walked in that small familiar house, I could not get away from what I had done, or from what I was still, so shamefully, so desperately, feeling. That day, I tried to act normal. I did my usual chores. I did the laundry. I even took a quick, unnecessary run into town. But Russell, he was always there. Watching me, waiting, testing me with his quiet, knowing glances. Later that evening, I was folding clothes in the laundry room when I found one of his shirts, buried deep under my own lingerie in the bottom of the basket. Not just any shirt. The one he had worn on the night it had all happened. It still carried his scent. Clean cotton, a faint musk, and something else. Something I could only describe as sin. I dropped it, as if it had burned my hand. When Victor came home that evening, he kissed my cheek as he always did. He sat at the dinner table and told me about a busted fence line in a neighbor's new bull. He did not notice a single thing was different. And that broke me even more. That night, I lay in bed beside him, silent, still, his back turned to me, his breathing deep and even. And my phone, on the nightstand beside me, buzzed. A message from Russell, just 2 words. "Still thinking?" I turned the screen over and tried to sleep, but sleep did not come. Instead, the memories replayed in my mind over and over again. His hands, his breath, the way my name had sounded in his mouth, and worse, so much worse, the treacherous part of me that now wanted more. The next morning, my husband Victor left early again for the ranch. I was in the kitchen scrubbing an already clean pan much harder than I needed to, when Russell came up silently behind me. His strong arms wrapped around my waist, his touch slow, certain. I froze. "You haven't told him," he whispered against my hair. "So I'm guessing you're not done yet." I tried to push him away, but he was stronger, hungrier. "We are done, Russell," I insisted. "It was a mistake, a one-time thing." He just smirked against my skin. "Then why," he murmured, "do you keep wearing that perfume? The one I told you drives me crazy?" I had no answer for him, because deep down I knew I had put it on for him. That afternoon I had called my best friend Cheryl, who lived an hour away in Red Lodge. I didn't tell her everything, of course, but I said enough. I confessed that I had blurred the line with Russell. Her long, shocked silence on the other end of the line was like a physical slap. "Tracy," she had finally said, "you need to stop this now, before this blows up your entire life." But it was already blowing up. Inside me, all around me, between Russell and Victor. Because the guilt had finally arrived, and it had brought company, annoying paranoia, a deep pervasive shame, and a secret I knew I could not possibly carry for much longer. But then, something happened that shifted everything again. That night, Victor came into our room and said, "Russell and I are driving up to Helena next weekend. We're going to help my Uncle Frank with the big cattle auction." I just nodded. And then Victor added something that made my stomach twist into a cold, tight knot. He told me, Victor said, that he's thinking of staying up there for a while after the auction. Getting some space. He said things feel complicated down here. Complicated. Had he told Victor something? Was he planning to leave? Or worse, was he just playing me, toying with me? That night, I waited until the house was quiet again. Then I walked to Russell's room and opened the door without knocking. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, shirtless again. But this time, I didn't say a single word. He looked up at me and said, "I knew you would come back." I stepped into his room, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to know the truth about who this boy, this man, really was, what he truly wanted from me. And what he said next shattered everything I thought I understood. Russell's room smelled faintly of cedar and sweat. The single lamp on his nightstand cast a soft yellow glow across his bare, muscular chest. He looked too calm, too confident, as if he had been waiting for this very moment, not just tonight, but for weeks. I closed the door softly behind me. "What do you want from me, Russell?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Though I held his gaze, he just leaned back on his elbows on the bed, his legs spread wide, his dark, intense eyes fixed on mine. "I want to know why you keep pretending that you don't want this, Tracy," he said. "I want to know why you look at me like you're starving, but you act like you're afraid to eat." My face flushed with a hot, angry shame. A part of me wanted to scream at him, "You are my stepson." But another, more honest part of me wanted to scream at myself, "You let this happen." "I am not a child anymore, Tracy," he added, his voice low, almost a growl. "You can stop treating me like one. You saw what I have. You touched it. You tasted it. Now you tell me you want to go back to pretending." He stood up slowly then, and every single inch of him reminded me just how far he had come from that awkward, shy teenager I had once helped with his high school projects. Now, he was a man, and he knew it, and worse, he knew that I knew it too. I turned away from him then, holding on to the doorknob, as if it were my only lifeline. "You're leaving next weekend with your father. That's good. We need the space between us." I felt him step closer, felt his warm breath on the back of my neck. "Or maybe," he said, his voice now too casual, "I just tell him everything before we go." I froze. "What did you just say?" He chuckled under his breath, a low, cruel sound. "Relax. I'm not that cruel. Yet. But I think you should hear something. The truth." I turned around slowly to face him. "What truth?" He sat back down on the bed then, his elbows resting on his knees. "You think I just lost control that night, right? That I just saw you in the hallway and couldn't stop myself." He paused for a moment, then that same, wicked smirk touched his lips. "I made that happen, Tracy. On purpose." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" I left my door cracked open so you would hear me, he confessed. I whispered your name because I knew you would be up, wandering the house. I knew your husband would be dead asleep. I wanted you to walk in. I wanted you to see what you had been pretending not to look at for months. I couldn't breathe. I saw how you looked at me in the mornings, he continued. The perfume you started wearing, the new dresses with the low backs, the lingering touches when you thought no one else was watching. You were just as guilty as I was, long before anything ever happened between us. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. You set me up? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He just shrugged. I gave you a choice, Tracy. And you made it. My knees buckled slightly then, and I had to sit down on the edge of his bed, completely, utterly stunned. He hadn't just seduced me, he had manipulated me, played me like a complete and utter fool. And the worst part, he wasn't wrong. I had noticed him, I had watched him, I had craved him. And on that first fateful night, I had made a choice. What do you want from me now? I asked, my voice still barely a whisper. He leaned in close then, his hand gently, almost tenderly, cupping my jaw. I want you to admit that you liked it, he said, that you needed it, that you are so tired of being invisible in your own marriage. Tears, hot and angry, welled in my eyes, but I did not let them fall, because a part of me, the part I now hated the most, completely, utterly agreed with him. Victor hadn't truly touched me in years, hadn't made me feel like a woman, like a desire, like anything other than a simple, convenient fixture in his quiet, fading world. But this wasn't love. This was power, lust, and a cruel, calculated control. And now, I finally saw Russell for what he truly was. Not a young, lonely boy craving affection, but a man, playing a dangerous, manipulative game. A game he was until this very moment winning. I stood up then and faced him. You want to win, Russell? Fine. You got what you wanted. But this ends now. You will leave with your father next weekend. You will go to Helena. And you will forget that any of this ever happened. And if you ever threaten to tell him, I swear to you, I will burn every single bridge you have ever built. He looked surprised for a moment, then genuinely, deeply amused. You really think you can just pretend that nothing happened between us? I stepped closer to him then, my eyes locked on his. I have lived with bigger, more dangerous lies than you, Russell. And I will survive this one too. He stared at me for a long, silent beat, and then he smiled, a new, almost respectful smile. Guess you're stronger than I thought. As I turned and walked out of his room, I knew that the consequences of that summer would follow me for the rest of my life, that the guilt would settle deep in my bones for years to come, that I might never, ever be able to forgive myself. But in that moment, I had taken back my own control. I had drawn a final definitive line in the ashes of our shared, terrible secret. And even if my own marriage would never truly be the same again, even if I would never look at myself in the same way again, I had at long last chosen to stop the fire before it completely, utterly consumed everything and everyone in its path.